Shawn Michaels was interrupted by Dolph Ziggler, who is sick of all these legends hogging the spotlight. He said at Raw Reunion, Shawn was an embarrassment. He was as embarrassing as a Goldberg match. Embarrassing as Goldberg. I think he was as embarrassing as Goldberg in a wrestling ring is exactly what he said. That's the second dig that Ziggler has taken at Goldberg, I think, in as many weeks. He said it was embarrassing watching Shawn last year in Saudi Arabia back in the ring. And Shawn agreed with him and said, you know what? That match, it was embarrassing. Which is funny because when I think back to that match at Crown Jewel, I mean, the whole thing was just a complete cluster. And Triple H got hurt and just nobody really looked good coming out of that match. But I thought Shawn was the least embarrassing part of that entire match. He did everything he could to try to keep it together. I still can't get the image of bald Shawn Michaels wrestling. It just seems completely unnatural to me. But he was kind of the glue that held that thing together after Triple H got hurt. And I thought Shawn, he was slower, but he looked fine. So that's kind of ironic that he would say of all the things when it comes to that match that Shawn was an embarrassment. It's probably the furthest thing from the truth. But Michaels said, what's more embarrassing is working your entire career as a second-rate Shawn Michaels. And Miz piped in and said, listen, if you want to do something instead of complaining, why don't you actually do something? Do something about it, is what the Miz told Dolph to do. And so Dolph tried to hit Shawn. Shawn ducked. He hit Miz instead. Shawn then punched Ziggler, went over to check on Miz, and when he turned around, he ate a super kick. And it's a weird deal because they're not doing Shawn Michaels and Dolph Ziggler at SummerSlam. That's just not a match that they're doing, and there's no need for that match to happen. Okay? There's just no need. Either Shawn comes back against another big name, like another legend, or he comes back to put over one of the newer guys, and Dolph, sorry to say, he's not a newer guy anymore. So that match to me, this year, at this time, makes no sense. So they're not doing Michaels and Ziggler. And according to The Observer, and look, maybe Dave is wrong, but he claims that Miz is not the planned opponent. That Ziggler has a match at SummerSlam and The Miz is not the planned opponent, which makes no sense because that's the match they would seem to have been building to over the last few weeks. But I hear this, right? I hear that Miz might not be the opponent, but that Dolph has a match. And it leads me to only one conclusion. These Goldberg digs are intentional. They are intentional, and maybe they're intentional on the company's part because they're just petty and they're taking shots at Goldberg because they're not happy about what happened in Saudi Arabia. Would not be the first time that this company has been petty. So that's possible. But I mean, they are intentionally placed to set something up. And that is Goldberg coming back in and squashing Dolph Ziggler at SummerSlam. You got to imagine that Goldberg, I think he even said as much on Twitter after that horrible match, he cannot be happy with how things went in Saudi Arabia. He cannot be happy about that possibly being the last image in a wrestling ring that people have of him, bleeding, concussed, having a shitty match. Even Goldberg, who didn't grow up a huge wrestling fan, I'm sure has enough pride in him, in his work, that he does not want to go out that way. And there being any kind of bad blood between him and WWE doesn't really benefit him, because that's the most logical place for him to go back and try to redeem himself. Although I'm sure AEW would love to sign Goldberg if they knew he was available, even just as a one-shot. So I look at this and I say to myself, it all makes sense. Plant these little digs. Goldberg surely wants to come back at least one more time and rectify the disaster that happened in Saudi Arabia. Undertaker did. He redeemed himself at Extreme Rules. He looked pretty good in that tag team match. It was a tag team match, of course, so he didn't have to wrestle the whole match on his own. It was really the best possible scenario for The Undertaker. In there was Shane McMahon. He could throw him around. So he was able to make people forget about what happened in Saudi Arabia. And all of a sudden people were like, man, look at The Undertaker. He looks great. Michael Cole made this idiotic comment. I know, right? Not the first time. And I hate when they do this. And this is exactly why the WWE announcers have no credibility. Michael Cole is a very good announcer when he is allowed to be. But when Michael Cole has to sit out there, as he did at Extreme Rules, this was at the very end of the match where Undertaker and Roman Reigns won. They beat McIntyre and Shane. And I think it was Cole who made the comment about The Undertaker looking as good as ever. And I said to myself, you fucking idiot. And I know he's just taken orders. Whoever scripted that line, Vince, whoever it was. The Undertaker has never looked better. There is not a person, the Undertaker himself cannot think that he looks as good as he has ever looked. Why in God's name would you have your announcers make a comment like that? I don't know why you wouldn't want your announcers to maintain some shred of credibility. And I just remember hearing that and going, these people are idiots. They must think that we are the dumbest people on the face of the earth. You could say The Undertaker has, just dominated Shane McMahon, and The Undertaker, channeling The Undertaker of old. Or The Undertaker, he looked impressive tonight. You can come up with 50,000 things that would have been fine to say and they would have been accurate. The Undertaker looking as good as ever. What do you have, cataracts in your eyes? Unbelievable. Hey, I didn't plan to go off on that little tangent. Back to business here. Back to Goldberg. So Undertaker had a chance to redeem himself. And I look at this and I go, if that's not what this is, if the plan is not for Goldberg to come back and wrestle Dolph Ziggler at SummerSlam in a quick squash, then it seems awfully mean-spirited for them to shit on this guy if they ever want to do business with him again. Like, yeah, he got hurt early in the match with The Undertaker, and he stunk out the joint at Super Showdown. I can say that. I can say that he stunk out the joint and he looked like shit, because that's what happened. It was a disaster. But I'm not booking Goldberg on my show. Even if I ran a show, I doubt I could afford his price tag. I come on my show, I say it like it is. If Goldberg comes back for one more match and he looks dominant and he beats Dolph Ziggler in 20 seconds and he does a one-arm jackhammer, then I'll come on the show live that night on the live stream and I'll say, you know what, Goldberg looked pretty good. Goldberg looked like a badass. But that's what it was. It was a disaster. I don't see where the company benefits from pissing this guy off and creating a rift. They had mended fences. Goldberg was back in the fold. He was back in the family. Good to have somebody like him, by the way, back in your stable. Now that you've got AEW out there, they're signing everybody. They want everybody to stay put. They certainly don't want to lose somebody with a name like Goldberg. Why would you want to force him to go to TNT? Why would you want to take little pot shots at him unless this is all part of some grander plan? So maybe Dolph makes another comment on TV this week. Dolph's lined up for a whole bunch of matches. He's got Seth on Monday. He's got Finn Balor on Tuesday. He's going to be all over the shows this week. Maybe he takes another dig at Goldberg, and it's one dig too many, and Goldberg happens to be there. He comes out, he spears him. And that's how it kind of builds to a match. And then they get one more attraction to add to SummerSlam this year. And if they do that match, it should end very quickly. I mean, I'm sorry, Dolph. It should not go longer than 30 seconds. Kevin Owens pinned Dolph Ziggler in 17 seconds at Extreme Rules. This should not last much longer than that.